I never imagined my life would come to this. You go into a marriage thinking it's going to be you and her against the world, but sometimes, the person you trust most is the one who destroys you. My name is Michael Thompson, and for the last 10 years, I've been married to Jessica. We had what I thought was the perfect marriage, at least, that's what I told myself. We met in college, and from the moment we started dating, I was hooked. She was funny, beautiful, and had this wild, adventurous spirit that made me feel alive. But looking back now, I see the signs. The little lies. The way she twisted things when she got caught in them. The way she always made me feel like the crazy one when I questioned her. I ignored them because I loved her. Because I wanted to believe she loved me just as much. The truth hit me like a freight train 3 weeks ago. It started small. Jessica became distant, glued to her phone more than usual, taking calls in the other room. At first, I brushed it off. She worked in PR, so she was always handling clients and putting out fires. But then, she started working late. A lot. I have a big campaign coming up, she'd say, giving me that exasperated look like I was a child interrupting her. I wanted to trust her. I really did. But one night, she left her laptop open, and I caught a glimpse of a message notification before the screen went dark. It was from someone named T. All it said was, "Can't wait to see you again." That was it. That was all it took for my world to tilt sideways. I sat there for a long time, staring at the dark screen. My stomach felt like it had been yanked inside out. I could have confronted her right then, demanded answers, but I knew Jessica. She would lie. She would gaslight. She would spin it around on me. So, I waited. That weekend, she told me she was going on a girls' trip with her friend Ashley. They were renting a cabin up north for some much-needed relaxation. But Ashley? She had no idea what I was talking about when I casually mentioned the trip over text. That's when I knew. Jessica wasn't going on a girls' trip. She was meeting someone, and I was going to find out who. I don't know what kind of idiot I was to believe her for as long as I did. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. But when Ashley straight up told me she had no idea about any girls' trip, something inside me cracked. That night, Jessica packed her bags with the same smug energy she always had when she thought she was getting away with something. She barely even looked at me, just threw a few cute little outfits into her duffel, kissed me on the cheek like I was some clueless fool, and strutted out the door with a casual, "Love you, babe." I stood there in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles went white. Love me? If she really loved me, she wouldn't be sneaking off in the middle of nowhere to meet some guy. I had two choices: sit at home and pretend everything was fine, or follow her and find out the truth myself. It wasn't even a question. Jessica had no idea that I had stuck an AirTag inside her car's glove box a few months ago. Paranoia? Maybe. But after the weird behavior started, I needed to be sure. That night, after she left, I checked my phone and watched the little dot move further and further away from our town, heading straight into the woods of upstate New York. She wasn't just sneaking around. She was going out of her way to do it somewhere remote. Somewhere she didn't think anyone would catch her. I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and started driving. The farther I went, the more the roads turned to dark, winding paths. Trees loomed on either side of me, their bare branches clawing at the sky. It was a 2-hour drive, and every minute felt like a lifetime. By the time I got close to her location, I killed my headlights and parked a good half-mile down the road. If she was here to meet someone, the last thing I needed was to spook her. I got out of my car, my breath visible in the cold night air, and started walking. Jessica's car was parked outside a small, rustic-looking cabin. The kind you'd rent for a romantic getaway, complete with a stone chimney and a wraparound porch. The windows glowed warmly against the darkness, and inside, I could see movement. I crept closer, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. When I got to the side of the cabin, I pressed my back against the wooden wall, taking slow, deep breaths. I could hear voices now, hers, clear as day, and a man's voice I didn't recognize. "God, I missed you," he murmured. Jessica's laugh. The same laugh that used to be mine. "You're such a tease." How do you think I felt? I had to pretend to be the perfect little wife for weeks. I shut my eyes, trying to breathe through the rage rising in my chest. Perfect little wife. The sound of clinking glasses. The rustle of fabric. Then his voice again, low and eager. "How long do we have?" Jessica sighed dramatically. "The whole weekend. He thinks I'm with Ashley." My fingers curled into fists. Then she giggled. "God, you should have seen his face when I kissed him goodbye. Poor thing. He really has no clue." I almost stormed in right then and there. Almost. But something stopped me. I needed to see more. I needed to know. I crouched low and moved toward the nearest window, heart pounding in my ears. The cabin's curtains were open just enough for me to see inside. Jessica stood by the fireplace, holding a wine glass, dressed in nothing but a thin robe that barely covered her. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years. And the man? Tall, dark hair, a little younger than me. He had that rich, cocky look, like the kind of guy who had never been told no in his life. He stood behind her, hands on her waist, whispering something in her ear that made her giggle and tilt her head to the side. She let the robe slip down one shoulder. And then they kissed. It wasn't just a kiss. It was the kind of kiss that shattered whatever illusion of marriage I had left. It was hungry, desperate, like she'd been starving for him. She never kissed me like that anymore. I swallowed hard, my vision going red. My entire body screamed at me to do something. To run inside and rip them apart, to demand answers, to make him pay for touching my wife. But instead, I stood there, frozen, watching the love of my life fall into bed with someone else. Watching as she betrayed me in the worst way possible. And when the sound started, soft at first, then escalating into something unmistakable, I finally turned away. My soul felt like it had been ripped out of my body. I stumbled back into the woods, gasping for breath, feeling like I was going to be sick. I had come here for proof, and now I had it. More than I ever wanted. Jessica wasn't just cheating. She was enjoying it, loving every second of it. And I had no idea what to do next. I don't know how long I stood there in the cold, staring at nothing. My mind wasn't working right. It was like my body had shut down, unable to process what I'd just seen. The woman I loved. The woman I married. Moaning another man's name in a secluded cabin while I stood outside like some pathetic fool. I forced myself to move, step by step, until I was deeper in the woods, far enough away that I didn't have to hear them anymore. But the silence didn't help. My thoughts screamed inside my head, and no matter how hard I tried to steady my breathing, I couldn't stop shaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear through that door and drag her out, make her explain how she could do this to me. But I already knew the answer, didn't I? She didn't love me. Maybe she never had. Because you don't do this to someone you love. The worst part? She had been playing me for weeks, maybe even months. All those nights she came home late, acting exhausted. The way she brushed me off whenever I tried to touch her. The fake smiles. The distracted kisses. I had been nothing to her. A convenience. A placeholder. And now I knew. I took out my phone with trembling fingers and snapped a few pictures of her car in front of the cabin. Then I walked back toward the window, rage burning through my veins, and lifted my phone again. The curtains were still open. Jessica was sprawled out on the couch now, her head resting in his lap while he stroked her hair. She looked peaceful. Like this was normal. Like she hadn't just destroyed me. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached and snapped another photo. Proof. Let her lie now. Let her try to gaslight me when I showed her these. I backed away, gripping my phone like a lifeline. My vision blurred with anger, my body running on pure adrenaline. I didn't even realize I was crying until the cold air hit my face, turning the tears into ice. I wiped them away furiously. No, I wouldn't break down. Not yet. Right now, I had one mission, make her pay. I walked back to my car, my footsteps crunching over dead leaves. The whole way, my mind spun through the options. What now? What do I do with this? I could storm in there and confront her. Drag her out of that damn cabin and make her look me in the eye. But that would only give her time to twist the story, turn it into something that somehow made me the bad guy. Or I could wait. Be patient. Be smart. Jessica didn't know I was onto her. She still thought she was getting away with it. That meant I had the upper hand. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the road ahead. The woods were silent around me, stretching out like an endless void. It felt like a metaphor for my life, dark, cold, and empty. I checked my phone again. The GPS tracker showed her car parked right where I had seen it. No surprises. No changes. Then a new thought hit me, sharp and dangerous. Who was he? I hadn't seen his face clearly. I needed to know. If I was going to burn their world down, I needed all the details. The next morning, I drove back home, feeling like I was floating outside my own body. I went through the motions, showered, changed, even made coffee, but I felt nothing. Just a quiet, simmering rage beneath the surface, waiting to erupt. Jessica still wasn't home. Of course, she wasn't. I sat down at my laptop and started digging. First, I checked her social media. Nothing unusual, just the same fake, perfect life she had been pretending to live. Weekend with the girls, Her latest post read. I stared at the caption beneath a photo of an empty wine glass. Lying bitch. Next, I logged into her phone account. I had never felt the need to check before, but now I needed everything. And there it was. One number stood out, a repeated contact that wasn't saved in her phone but had hundreds of calls and texts. Multiple times a day. I copied the number and did a reverse search. And when the name popped up, my stomach twisted into knots. Nathan Parker. It took me a second to place it, but then it hit me. Nathan. From her office. I had met him once at a holiday party. He shook my hand with that fake corporate smile and told me how lucky I was to have Jessica. I wanted to throw my laptop across the room. I knew his name. I knew his number. And soon, I would know everything. I copied every single text message between them from the phone logs. Then I sat back, heart pounding, staring at the evidence in front of me. This wasn't over. I wasn't just going to catch them. I was going to make sure she lost everything. I spent the next few hours going through everything, our phone records, her emails, even her cloud storage. Every single thing I found chipped away at the last shred of hope I had left. The text logs between Jessica and Nathan weren't just casual. They weren't just flirtatious. They were filthy, desperate, the kind of messages that made it painfully obvious this wasn't some brief lapse in judgment. This had been going on for a long time. She told him she loved him. She told him she couldn't wait to finally be free from me. She talked about how clueless I was, how easy it was to manipulate me, how she had been checked out of our marriage for years but kept me around because I was convenient. It wasn't just betrayal, it was mockery. She laughed at me behind my back, made fun of the very foundation of the life I had built for us. And Nathan? That smug bastard encouraged it. He told her she deserved better. Told her I was holding her back. Told her that once she was rid of me, they could start a real life together. I stared at the messages for so long that my vision blurred. The anger wasn't hot anymore, it was ice cold, creeping into every corner of my body, numbing everything else. I wasn't just angry at her. I was angry at myself. Angry for being so blind, for letting her turn me into a joke, for not seeing the signs that now felt so goddamn obvious. I thought back to all the nights she had come home late, exhausted, too tired to even hold a conversation with me. I thought about all the weekends she claimed she was visiting her sister, all the work, emergencies that conveniently popped up every time we were supposed to spend time together. And I thought about the way she used to look at me in the early years of our marriage, how that look had slowly faded until she barely looked at me at all. She had been pulling away for years, and I had let her. I had let her destroy what we had while I stood there, smiling like a fool, believing every single lie she fed me. That ended now. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg her for an explanation or give her the satisfaction of watching me break. She wanted to play games? Fine. I would play too. But I wouldn't just leave quietly like some humiliated husband. No, I was going to burn her entire world to the ground. The first thing I did was forward every single message to my personal email, making sure I had backups in multiple places. Then, I started making calls. A lawyer first, an aggressive one, the kind that specialized in high-conflict divorces. I wanted Jessica to walk away from this with nothing. I wanted her to regret ever thinking she could use me and toss me aside like garbage. Then, I reached out to a private investigator. I wanted proof, photos, videos, timestamps, everything I could use against her. And finally, I made a call to Nathan's wife. Yes, Nathan was married. And yes, I fully intended to make sure she knew every single thing her husband had been up to. I didn't stop to question if I was being too cruel, if I was acting out of pure vengeance. Because the truth was, I didn't care. Jessica had made her choice. She had made me look like an idiot for years. Now, it was my turn to return the favor. The next morning, I acted normal. That was the hardest part, pretending. I got up, showered, made breakfast, and went about my day like nothing had changed. Jessica was still at the cabin with her lover, blissfully unaware that her world was about to collapse. The thought of her lying there in that bed, tangled up with him, while I sat in our home, playing the role of the unsuspecting husband, it made me sick. But I needed patience. I spent the entire day setting everything in motion. The private investigator got back to me almost immediately, eager to take the case. He assured me that by the time Jessica returned from her girls' trip, I would have everything I needed. He even offered to plant a GPS tracker on her car to track her movements going forward. I agreed without hesitation. Then came the hardest part, calling Nathan's wife. I had never met her before, but I knew her name was Lauren. I found her number easily enough after a quick online search. When she picked up, she sounded cheerful, completely unaware that her life was about to shatter. "Hi, Lauren," I said, my voice calm despite the rage simmering underneath. "You don't know me, but I think you should sit down. We need to talk about your husband." There was silence on the other end. Then, a cautious, "Who is this?" I took a deep breath. "My name is Michael Thompson. My wife is Jessica Thompson, and she's been sleeping with your husband." A sharp inhale. Then, nothing. I could hear her breathing, rapid and uneven, like she was trying to process what I had just said. "You're lying," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I wish I was," I told her. "But I have proof. A lot of it. Text messages, phone records, even pictures of them together at a cabin this weekend." She didn't say anything for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold. "Send me everything." I did. Within seconds, I heard the chime of her phone receiving the messages. Then, a long silence. When she finally spoke again, she was crying. "How long?" "Months, at least," I said. "Maybe longer." Another pause. Then, a quiet, "Thank you." And just like that, I had my first ally. By the time Jessica came home the next evening, I had everything I needed. The private investigator had sent me dozens of pictures, Jessica and Nathan, wrapped around each other, laughing, kissing, completely oblivious to the camera lens capturing their every move. There were timestamps, receipts from the cabin rental, even a video of them leaving together the next morning. It was airtight. I was sitting at the kitchen table when she walked in, all smiles, dropping her bag by the door. "Hey, babe," she said casually, as if she hadn't just spent the weekend screwing another man. "Miss me?" I stared at her, silent. For the first time in our marriage, I saw her clearly. The lies, the manipulation, the absolute lack of guilt, it was all there. She tilted her head, frowning. "Everything okay?" I finally smiled. A real smile. One that made her shift uncomfortably. "Oh, yeah," I said smoothly. "I just wanted to make sure you got to enjoy your last trip before the divorce." Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. I reached into my bag, pulled out the thick folder of evidence, and tossed it onto the table between us. She stared at it like it was a ticking bomb. And in a way, it was. "Sit down, Jessica," I said, my voice calm. "We need to talk." For the first time ever, she was the one who looked afraid. And I had never felt so goddamn satisfied in my life. Jessica didn't sit. She didn't even reach for the folder. She just stood there, her hands twitching at her sides, her face frozen in that perfect mask of forced indifference. But I could see it, the flicker of fear in her eyes, the slight tremor in her fingers. She knew. She knew that whatever was inside that folder could end her. I leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms out, exuding the kind of confidence I hadn't felt in years. "Go ahead," I said, nodding toward the folder. "Open it. Take your time." My voice was calm, measured, completely unlike the storm raging inside me. She didn't move, so I decided to help her along. I reached over, flipped the folder open, and spread out the contents on the table like I was laying down a royal flush in a game she had already lost. Photos, her and Nathan wrapped around each other, kissing like teenagers, tangled up in that goddamn cabin. Screenshots, pages and pages of text messages, each one a nail in the coffin of whatever pathetic defense she thought she could come up with. Bank statements, evidence that she had taken money from our joint account to fund her affair. Her breath hitched. I watched her take it all in, watched the gears turn in that deceitful little brain of hers as she scrambled for an escape route. Then, finally, she spoke. "I can explain." I laughed, loud and bitter. "Oh, I bet you can. Can't wait to hear this one." She took a shaky step forward, then another, her hands reaching for me in that familiar, manipulative way. "Michael, please, it's not what it looks like." I cut her off, standing up so abruptly that my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "Don't," I said, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. "Don't you dare insult me with that bullshit. You think I'm an idiot? You think I didn't see you?" I took a step closer, lowering my voice to something colder, something dangerous. "I was there, Jessica. I saw you. I heard you. I watched you crawl into bed with him, moaning his name like our marriage was some fucking joke to you." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time in her miserable life, Jessica Thompson didn't have a lie ready. I took advantage of the silence. "You humiliated me. For months, maybe years, you used me, laughed at me behind my back while you played house with that smug little bastard. And now what? Now you want to explain?" Now you want to pretend this is some kind of misunderstanding. I scoffed, shaking my head. Save it, Jessica. We're done. Her eyes widened. Wait, no, Michael, just listen to me. Done. I roared, slamming my hand down on the table. I don't care what you have to say. I don't care why you did it. I don't care how sorry you are, because I know you're not. You weren't sorry when you were fucking him. You weren't sorry when you lied to my face. You weren't sorry when you spent our money on your little getaways. You're only sorry now because you got caught. She was crying now, big fat crocodile tears streaming down her face, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no longing for the woman I once loved. Because that woman was dead. Or maybe she had never existed at all. You need to leave, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. Tonight. I've already talked to a lawyer. I've already filed for divorce. And if you think for 1 second that I'm going to make this easy for you, think again. I'm taking everything, Jessica. The house, the accounts, the car. You will leave this marriage with exactly what you brought into it. Nothing. Her sobs grew louder. Michael, please, let's just talk. Let's fix this. I shook my head. There's nothing to fix. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the wreckage of the life she had burned to the ground. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was heartbroken, because I wasn't. I was too angry, too vindicated to feel anything remotely close to sadness. Instead, I stayed up, thinking, planning, making sure that when this was over, Jessica would regret everything. By morning, she was gone. She must have left sometime in the middle of the night, tail tucked between her legs. I didn't care where she went. Maybe to a friend's house, maybe to a hotel, maybe straight into Nathan's waiting arms. It didn't matter. She was out. And now, it was time for phase 2. Lauren, Nathan's wife, had been more than helpful since our conversation. After I sent her the proof of their affair, she wasted no time in confirming her own suspicions. Turns out, she had been questioning Nathan for months, but like me, she had wanted to believe the best. Until now. She called me that morning, her voice shaking but determined. I want to ruin him, she said simply. Good, I replied. So do I. And that's exactly what we did. Lauren sent copies of the texts and photos to Nathan's boss, because, surprise, surprise, Nathan and Jessica weren't just cheating on us. They were also breaking company policy. Their PR firm had strict rules against inter-office relationships, especially when one party was married. And guess what? Nathan wasn't just an employee. He was Jessica's boss. By lunchtime, I got a text from Lauren. He's fired. I smiled. One down. Next, I contacted every mutual friend Jessica and I had, letting them know exactly what she had done. No more playing the clueless husband. No more protecting her reputation. I let the truth spread like wildfire. I didn't embellish, didn't exaggerate. I didn't have to. The evidence spoke for itself. By the end of the day, Jessica was a social pariah. Then came the final blow. I met with my lawyer and finalized the divorce papers. Everything was lined up. Jessica would get nothing. No spousal support, no assets, no cushy settlement. The prenup we had signed when we first got married, something she had laughed about back then, was now her downfall. When I texted her the details, she called me immediately, her voice hysterical. Michael, you can't do this to me. I chuckled. I already did. You're being so cruel, she sobbed. We can work something out, we can Did you think about working something out when you spread your legs for Nathan? I asked, my voice dripping with venom. Silence. Then, she whispered, I hate you. I grinned. Good. That means I won. And just like that, I hung up, deleting her number, blocking her from every account, every part of my life. Jessica wanted a fresh start? Well, now she had one. Completely alone. The silence after I hung up on Jessica was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, feeling something I hadn't felt in months, peace. There was no more uncertainty, no more paranoia eating away at me, no more pathetic attempts to convince myself that my marriage wasn't a total lie. Jessica was out of my life, and everything she had built for herself, her reputation, her job, her little fantasy life with Nathan, was crumbling. Over the next few days, the fallout spread like wildfire. Nathan tried to fight his termination, claiming it was unfair and a personal attack, but the company wasn't having it. PR firms don't take kindly to scandals, especially when one of their senior executives gets caught screwing a married employee. He was done. No severance, no recommendations, just a disgraced former hotshot with nowhere to go. Lauren, his now furious wife, wasted no time in taking things a step further. She wasn't just divorcing him, she was taking everything. Their house? Hers. Their shared savings? Hers. Their 2 kids? He would be lucky to see them on holidays. And Jessica? Oh, Jessica was drowning. The friends she had spent years carefully curating, the people she had manipulated, charmed, and used to build up her social standing, were turning their backs on her one by one. No one wanted to be associated with the woman who blew up her marriage for a workplace fling that lasted less than a year. The reality of it must have hit her like a freight train because she started calling me again. Not to apologize, not to own up to anything, but to bargain. Michael, I'm in a really bad place right now, she sniffled into the phone one evening, clearly trying to sound broken and fragile. I lost my job, I don't have anywhere to go, and I don't know what to do. I know we've had our issues, but we were together for so long and maybe. I cut her off, leaning back in my chair, smirking at how pathetic she sounded. Let me stop you right there, Jessica. Whatever sob story you're about to feed me. I don't care. She choked on her words. Michael, please, You want sympathy? Go find someone else to con, I said flatly. I'm not your safety net anymore. You made your choice, remember? You wanted Nathan. You wanted your freedom. So go live with it. But nothing, I snapped. This conversation is over. And for the final time, I hung up on her. This time, I didn't just block her. I changed my number. She would never contact me again. I sat there for a long moment, feeling the weight of everything lift off my shoulders. She was gone. Her power over me was gone. I wasn't just free, I had one. And yet, there was still one more thing left to do. Nathan was the only loose end left, and I wasn't about to let him walk away unscathed. Sure, he had lost his job, his wife, and any shred of credibility in his industry, but I wanted to watch him break. I wanted to see the exact moment he realized just how badly he had fucked up. So I arranged a meeting. I texted Lauren, asking if she knew where he was staying, and she responded almost immediately, some shitty motel off the highway. She sent me the address, and without hesitation, I drove over. The place was exactly what I expected, rundown, depressing, the kind of place where people go when they have nowhere else left. I parked across the street and waited. It didn't take long before I saw him step out of his room, looking like absolute shit. His usual polished, arrogant demeanor was gone. He was unshaven, dressed in wrinkled clothes that probably hadn't been washed in days, his hair a mess. He looked defeated. Good. I stepped out of my car and walked toward him. He noticed me immediately, his entire body tensing. What the hell do you want? He muttered, his voice hoarse. I smirked. Oh, I just wanted to see what rock bottom looks like. His jaw clenched. Fuck you. Funny, I mused, tilting my head. That's exactly what you were doing to my wife, wasn't it? Or has that little fantasy completely blown up in your face? He took a step toward me, but I didn't move. I wasn't scared of him. He wasn't some powerful executive anymore. He was nothing. You think this is funny? He growled. I shrugged. A little, yeah. Then I leaned in, lowering my voice. Tell me, Nathan, was she worth it? His face twisted in rage, but he had nothing left to fight me with. No job, no marriage, no money, just a ruined life and the knowledge that he did this to himself. You know what's really funny? I continued, my voice dripping with amusement. Jessica called me yesterday. She's desperate, scared, completely alone. And guess what? She didn't mention you. Not once. I watched the realization hit him like a truck. He had destroyed everything for her, and now? She wasn't even thinking about him. She wasn't his. She was no one's. His shoulders sagged. He opened his mouth, maybe to defend himself, maybe to throw one last weak insult, but I didn't care. I was done. I had seen enough. I patted his shoulder, grinning. Enjoy the motel life, buddy. Then I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there in his own personal hell. When I got back in my car, I exhaled slowly, letting the last of the anger drain out of me. It was over. Really over. There was no more Jessica, no more Nathan, no more of their bullshit weighing me down. I had one. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally move on. And you know what? It felt fucking good. It had been weeks since I last heard from Jessica. After my final conversation with her, after I had shut her out completely, blocked her from every aspect of my life, she had vanished. At first, there was a quiet sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted, like I could finally breathe again without the constant shadow of betrayal looming over me. But a part of me, the part that had been sharpened by months of anger and humiliation, knew it wasn't over. People like Jessica don't just disappear. They resurface when they need something, when they have no other options left. And sure enough, I got confirmation that she had crashed and burned harder than even I had expected. Lauren called me first. She had kept tabs on Nathan just as I had, if only to make sure he stayed ruined. Turns out, Jessica and Nathan had tried to keep their pathetic relationship going in the aftermath, but it didn't take long before reality set in. They weren't sneaking around anymore, riding the high of an illicit affair. They were just two pathetic, unemployed, broke idiots sitting in a shitty motel room, forced to acknowledge that they had blown up their lives for nothing. Nathan, who had once whispered about their fresh start and a real future together, bailed the second he realized Jessica wasn't some prize he had won, but dead weight. He left her with nothing. No money, no place to stay, no job prospects, no husband to fall back on. Just a broken reputation and the wreckage of the life she had once so carefully curated. Jessica had reached out to some of her friends, but no one wanted to associate with her. I had made sure of that. Every single person who once admired her, who envied her perfect marriage, knew exactly what kind of person she really was now. The invites to brunches, the social gatherings, the networking opportunities, all gone. She wasn't a power couple's charming, witty wife anymore. She was a cautionary tale. A woman who had cheated, lied, and lost. And for the first time in her life, there was no one left to manipulate. Then, about a week later, I got the final piece of news that sealed her fate. Jessica had crawled back to her parents. I almost laughed when I heard it. This was a woman who once turned her nose up at the idea of living a simple life, a woman who mocked people who settled in their hometowns, who thought she was too good for a boring, ordinary life. And now? Now she was living in her childhood bedroom, unemployed, humiliated, and completely alone. The last time I checked, she had tried to get a new job, but no one in her industry wanted to touch her. Turns out, when word gets around that you were fired for screwing your boss and ruining your husband's life, it doesn't exactly scream hireable. I could have left it at that. I could have let her rot in her own misery, knowing she had lost everything while I was finally free. But something in me wanted to make absolutely sure that she never recovered from this. I wasn't petty, I was just thorough. So, I sent one final email. I had gotten in touch with an industry contact, one of the many people Jessica had once schmoozed, convinced she was someone important. I casually let it slip that she was on the job hunt, and attached a few key pieces of information. Some of the text messages. A couple of the photos. Just enough to remind them exactly who she was. Within 48 hours, every single one of her potential job opportunities vanished. The last I heard, she was waiting tables at some rundown bar in her hometown, barely scraping by, forced to take shifts that people 10 years younger than her wouldn't even bother with. The same woman who used to brag about her designer handbags and luxury vacations was now cleaning up after drunk locals just to pay her half of the rent at her parents' house. And me? I moved on. The divorce was finalized, my assets untouched, my life fully my own again. I got back into the things I had once loved, traveling, hiking, spending time with friends who had always been there but who I had neglected while trying to keep my broken marriage alive. And for the first time in years, I felt light. I wasn't waking up every morning wondering if my wife was lying to me. Wasn't feeling that sickening weight in my chest every time she picked up her phone. I was free. One night, months after everything had settled, I got a text from an unknown number. I didn't have to guess who it was. Michael, I don't even know if you'll read this, but I'm so sorry. For everything. I don't know what I was thinking. I messed up. I lost everything, and I just wanted you to know that. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to try. I miss you. I miss our life. Please, if there's any part of you that can still talk to me, please. I stared at the message for a long time. Thought about all the nights I had spent wondering why I wasn't enough for her. Thought about all the ways she had disrespected me, humiliated me, discarded me. Then, I deleted the message. No reply. No acknowledgement. Just silence. Because Jessica Thompson didn't exist to me anymore. And that was the real punishment.